This scene in the countryside close to where I live, near the lakes, near the towpath that you and I so often walk along, is looking very arid indeed. Goodness. I'll get a sketchbook picture, but I don't think it's going to be an amazing landscape picture. I'll tell you what I'll do. I like these long grasses. I'll get down low and photograph through the grasses. There we go. I'm using my X100V. Let's shoot on f5.6. I'm at 160 ISO through the grass. A soft kind of shot, really. 750 shutter speed, 5.6, 160 ISO. A sketchbook photograph to start the day. And when I say sketchbook photograph, that's thanks to somebody you're about to meet.
I feel there's a level of kindness and dignity here that's a lot more consoling, if you will. In LA, I always felt like I had to be the tough girl and armor-plated, and certainly working as a photojournalist there for almost 30 years. But it was also such a competitive, slightly brutal culture that you could never be vulnerable.
The foreword.
Now, there's a word we moot often on this show, vulnerable and vulnerability. Today's photo walk isn't necessarily all about that word or those words, but there's certainly a strong thread within the podcast. I know I've talked a lot about how a camera is often some kind of shield, and guests tell me, particularly photojournalists and the kind of photographers who witness more conflict than most of us would ever wish to see in the real world, how there's a certain amount of detachment from the world when the camera is placed or rather held between you and the subject. It allows us to see in a way that we might otherwise not be able to bear. Funnily enough, in Civvy Street, you witness how cameras can be a shield in the most normal of situations too, such as, weddings is a really good example, where guests, and I've seen them, use cameras to feel more connected with large gatherings of people. Cameras can be a real mental stimulation, but they can also be a solace or a sort of sanctuary when you feel vulnerable. Helps them feel safer at times that they may be feeling anxious or nervous in a certain situation. But holding a camera doesn't always feel like armour. And I think, as my guest, Marissa Roth, will share today, to make photographs that matter, you really, often have to show a part of yourself, what you've noticed, what's stirred you, what you couldn't walk past. That's not only seeing the world, that's revealing how you feel about it. And that takes something, I think, akin to bravery. Vulnerability in photography manifests in various ways. It's that nagging doubt we get so many letters about when you share your work and you're wondering what others may think or say, particularly on social media. It's that showing up thing, even when the inspiration feels rather thin. We had a reflections piece on the Extra Mile this week about that sort of thing, when the voice in your head says you've got nothing new to say. But vulnerability can also, in its simplest form, be, and I'm learning this through my chats, a real guide. Because when you lean into unease or vulnerability, when you trust that your way of seeing has value, you begin to make pictures that are deeply yours. And I know that sounds a bit woo-woo, but I honestly mean it. Vulnerability becomes the place your best work and perhaps best life often begins. It helps you find connection. It lets others feel something too, not because the work is technically perfect, perish the thought, but because it's honest, brutally honest at times. I think of photographers we've spoken with on this show, like Jim Mortram with his small town inertia stories, shot of people in his hometown that he not only photographs but cares for. I think about him when we talk about vulnerability. Or more recently, Marcus Bleasdale, who left an extremely lucrative finance career because he allowed himself to feel the weight of what others were enduring around the world. And when I think of those or these storytellers, I start to understand, I think, what this V word is all about. So today I return to talk to a real friend of the show and personal friend now as well, Marissa Roth. who spent decades not only photographing but teaching and mentoring others who wish to tell stories about life. Photographers like Jim Mortram or Marcus, and those that follow in their footsteps. We do revisit topics that we've talked about a handful of times across the 5 years of this show now, but in all that time, our chats, the chats that I've had with Marissa, despite meeting in London from time to time, all our chats for the show have always been across Zoom. So to go to London, where she now lives, sit down and actually talk is a chance to revisit with some new thoughts about topics we've discussed before. Thoughts about her Women in War project, 4 decades in the making. Her personal revelatory time, I would say, in Tibet. The choices she made as part of a Pulitzer Prize-winning team covering events like the LA riots in the 80s, and all the showbiz stuff that she also photographed while she was there. Plus, we'll talk about the softer side now of her personal projects, and how moving to London taught her, after everything she's seen, that she's witnessed and photographed, how to finally weep. So vulnerability is a thread that runs through today's show, and that's why it's in the title of today's show. And I'm delighted to be spending personal time with a celebrated photojournalist, Marissa Roth.
Today on the Photo Walk.
My mother basically forbid us to cry. She equated crying with weakness. So there was kind of like a no-fly zone for vulnerability. Weekly, I was sent down to South Central LA, and there was a dead gang member under a white sheet. But, late at night, you could feel the vibration from the presses rolling, because the darkroom was 1 floor up, and it was wonderful. Because everything we do, even every photograph, is a reflection of who we are and what we're experiencing. So it's also taught me, who am I, and actually who do I want to be? Despite everything I've seen, I'm an eternal optimist.
That's Marissa Roth, my guest on the Photo Walk show today. It's another special where I spend time in London this time with former LA Times and New York Times photographer, a photojournalist who is a celebrated storyteller, Pulitzer Prize winner. I'll add to that mentor, explorer, empath, someone who can be photographing the most hard-hitting emotional stories for her 4-decade project, One Person Crying Women in War one moment, and photographing a still life poppy series the next. She's a thinker, and I'm proud to have her as a friend too. We seem to be photographing and featuring European capital cities this month. Last week Paris, this week London. But before we head to the smoke, as my mum used to call it, thank you to our patrons of this show, my extra milers, as you're so affectionately known. We're a few weeks into our new short weekday feature that you hear as a member, and the response has been great. So I thought at the end of today's show, I will play you one of our recent reflection pieces so that you can hear what our community hears. Thanks also to my sponsor, arthelper.ai. They help you to sell your photos online by making the posts and the mock-ups and the marketing emails for you. If you've ever thought, I want to sell my work, but I don't know where to start, arthelper.ai does all that tricky stuff for you. And you can get 30 days of the pro version free with the code PHOTOWALK when you go to arthelper.ai. So, shall we walk? Or at least in this heat, find a place to perch? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Can we have some cold water too, Neil? Yeah, check. Walking boots, check. Have you got spare film or an extra SD card? Check. Sunscreen, in this part of the world anyway. Yes, plenty of it, check. Well, let's walk. There's a fair amount of wind today as I walk, shading the microphone as I walk here, so you just don't end up with a tunnel of wind. It wasn't like that, or it's not like that, as you're about to find out in London as I talk to Marissa. The letters, the emails, the comments you leave gives our community a real uniqueness. It does. Your thoughts about walking, creativity and photography provides a very welcome respite from the noise of this world, as together during this show we put some miles under our feet and make a picture or two to remind us of where those footprints were left. Now, I did say last week that this week we'd dip into the mailbag again, although the plans slightly changed when I got a chance to visit London to talk with Marissa. And another interview that was supposed to be today with Marissa next week, well, they got switched around. Anyway, the kind of shows where I walk or spend time with people always end up being slightly different to our usual walks. So stand by for the letters. They will return. We shall delve, as the youth say, into the mailbag next week. Keep them coming in, though. The email for the show is stories@photowalk.show. Right. The grand plan, had been to walk and talk along something like the Embankment, or through one of the great parks of the city in London, perhaps the gritty, grainier part of London, Brick Lane, which I now really love photographing in. But 32 degrees in London had us seek shade in a garden that I've been incorrectly naming for a long, long time, as you're about to find out. Quelle surprise, Neil, I know. In fact, that takes up the conversation in the first part of what I like to think of as a meandering chat, the first 10 minutes or so of my conversation. But if you can't meander with a friend, what can you do? We do have some of our regular bits and bobs, such as the assignment, and I think we even have a winner for last month. Now, for extra milers, there's a special surprise today, and I know this is a bit early, and it sounds like a tease in every way, shape, or form. I suppose it is, really. But we, Marissa and I, are about to embark, and there's a clue in the word, embark, on a very special adventure that you'll hear about today on The Extra Mile, with the reflections called Luggage with a Past. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, back in the room, or at least London, for a special conversation today with a photojournalist, a Pulitzer Prize winner, Marissa Roth. You will hear some traffic in this show today. You might even hear the odd siren, possibly my nemesis, the helicopter. However, this is about as close as you can get, I think, in small gardens in West London to serenity. Now, I thought, and I might as well come clean on this one, when we originally talked about this special place, Marissa, I always thought this was the psychic garden. I know it's not now, and I feel a bit daft. I should have known that this special place that has been around here for many, many years, of which you're going to hopefully give me a little bit of history, but it's not the psychic garden. I thought that we might be here reading palms. It's the Physic Garden, honestly.
Yes, it is the Chelsea Physic Garden, although I'd be happy to look at your palm.
I'm not sure what it says.
Let me see.
Well, have a look. But
good, you have a long lifeline.
Well, it might be a lifeline. What does it say on the wealth line?
I think that's this one.
That's the really short one.
I think it goes this direction, so it's heading in the right way.
Oh, is it? Well, it looks like the smallest line to me. I met somebody at this. We're going to go. This is the wonderful thing about chatting with Marissa. We go. We wander in our conversation. I nearly said weave. I can no longer say weave.
Yeah.
It's been sullied, that word.
Oh.
I'm not doing the weave. I'm just meandering.
Okay.
I photographed a corporate gig the other day. And I don't know why I keep looking at my hand like the wealth line is going to grow. And we were talking about empathy, something that undoubtedly we're going to talk about today, I'm sure. And there was a room of 100 people, 10 people per table. And for the first hour of being there, I had no idea what this company did at all. But they were doing an exercise about what's important in corporations to help people work better together. And there were four. They each had a big pad, and there were 4 spaces, and they had to put words at the top and then write a bit more about what each word meant to them. And I went round 10 tables, and only one table had the word empathy on it as being important in the corporate structure. And I said to this really nice, very good American host, I said to him, isn't it interesting that there's only one table has written the word, which I think is the most powerful word, all subjective, I know, but empathy. And he looked at me square in the eyes and he said, we don't do empathy in this place.
Gosh. Well, I think the first thought that came to mind when you said this is, empathy is a key human emotion. Absolutely. And way of, socially engaging with other human beings. And the fact that we're not just losing it, but that it's not even considered vital, sort of, to any kind of human, I guess, practices. Yes, that's a corporate, but corporations are still made up of human beings, not just, machines and robots. But I guess, if people have to go in for the kill on a deal, it's hard to be empathetic if you want to take over another company or do something like that.
That's true. I say to my boys, if you can be empathic, that's probably one of the most important things you can be. And they both look at me in that, we haven't really got time for that, Dad, kind of way. But I do think empathy, empathic, empathetic. I like the word empathic, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't like the word empathetic because it suggests that there's a pathetic tied onto the end, which suggests that empath is not a good thing.
Well, to be an empath, though, means to be somebody who cares, somebody who relates to other people, who, looks at the world just solely from their own perspective.
Yeah.
I think photographers who do, work with humans, with people, you photograph weddings and you do a lot of social documentary work, my work, you have to be empathetic. You have to be able to get a sense of the person or the situation in order, I think, to get a meaningful photograph. But I don't know how to be in the world without being empathetic.
So the Physic Garden, as I now correctly call it, you have a lot of history with this place, don't you? It's very important to you.
Yes, this garden has sort of been in my life for about 20 or so years.
Wow.
When I was coming to London quite a bit in the early 2000s with my then husband, Nigel, who's a wonderful artist, he brought me here and he said, you have to know about this place.
Yeah.
And then it became a sanctuary during those years when we would come back to visit his sons. And then after that marriage ended and life moved forward, and I started coming to London quite a bit, actually because of the Atlantic Ocean Project. The crossings kept bringing me back here. And I knew Chelsea well because that's where we used to stay, and so it was a comfortable place for me. And then the Physic Garden was just always a destination. And then during the pandemic, I chose to get stuck in London rather than go back to the U.S. And I found a tiny little shoebox-sized flat in a beautiful building on the embankment just around the corner. And the Physic Garden became my everything, my office. I would meet people here. I would meet friends here. I have one friend, Robert. We would literally bring a picnic. I'd go to a little Italian deli and bring all the yummy stuff, prosciutto and focaccia and some arugula and then some yummy dessert. And then he would always bring an expensive bottle of champagne.
What's that in your bag today, by the way?
And then Robert would bring a bottle of very good champagne.
Oh, how nice.
That was when you could still bring in your own alcohol here. Yeah. Anyway, and we'd sit rain or shine, cold or, whatever. And we usually sat on this same bench, which is right next to this wonderful little pond and this beautiful tree. And we would sit and have a picnic and drink champagne and laughed our heads off and survived another week during the pandemic. So since then, I still live nearby, not in the same shoebox flat. Now it's a little bit bigger, so I could bring all my shoes. And, and so...
but this is practically your back garden, actually.
Well, it is.
It's that close. It's
literally down the road
Yeah.
from where I live.
Yeah.
And as an Angelino growing up in a home and having had a couple other homes during those years, I'm not as comfortable living in a flat. So the garden is my garden, and I try to come here if I can every day to hang out, if it's possible, except when, of course, it's freezing, raining, pouring rain. But Anyway, yeah, and I've photographed here mainly during the winter months when it's much more exposed, where the structural engineering of the trees and nature, you can see through the glory of it like it is now. But yeah, so I love this. And I've learned a lot. I love trees and nature. So I've had a steep learning curve learning trees here and the different...
You're good at tree recognition?
I'm getting better, yes.
What are we in front of?
That I actually don't know.
Oh, it's a Latin name.
Yeah.
It's from Southeast States.
Yeah, so I don't know its non-Latin name, but there's two big ginkgo trees over there, which are about 200 years old. My favorite tree is a weeping beech tree, it's just over the other side.
I don't think of a beech as a weeping beech
Well, there's
tree.
two types.
Ah.
There's a regular beech that just kind of grows up, and then the weeping beech is the one where the leaves kind of, there's kind of like small little branches that droop down, and it's kind of, they just, cascade down, so it almost becomes like an umbrella. And they come with green leaves or with sort of aubergine colored leaves. It's quite beautiful. I think my favorite tree is a poplar tree. So if I ever have a little plot of land somewhere in England, I'm going to plant a poplar tree.
See, I know tree photographers and woodland photographers would say poplar. What?
Yeah, I don't know. I just love the shape of it. It's for me, it's airy but majestic at the same time.
You have to be really careful with them. If you plant enough, they just go mad, don't they?
Well, let me get settled in England first, and then I'll worry about planting a poplar tree.
When you say, let me just get settled, you've been coming back and forth for 20 years. You've been here this time, settled in Chelsea for quite a while. When is that point where you think, you're already saying the word flat instead of apartment. You're practically English.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. I love the word chuffed. So I got my indefinite leave to remain last year. So now I'm pretty much here. And now it's just a matter of sort of moving the rest of my life here, my photo archive. And I don't have a lot of furniture, but I have way too many photo books. I have about 500 photo books.
What?
So I need to find somebody with a big space to house them for me. But yeah, I think it's been more settling in my soul. To be honest, it took me a long time to find my place in the world. I never felt at home in LA or America. Even growing up, I always felt like a bit of a fish out of water. And I grew up in LA, had a great education, great work opportunities, dove in to all my work, but it was never like a heart home for me. And I think my parents were European, and I think in many ways I have a European heart, but obviously an American type A brain. So being here, I feel finally like it's my own. I think getting the residency, building work contacts, making truly genuine friendships, adapting to the weather, which has been...
Yeah, it's somewhat different to LA.
Oh my God, it's a lot. Although I think in a way it hasn't been a bad thing altogether, though. I've learned how to live slower here. I've learned how to weep here, actually. I never was a very good crier. And it's given, I feel there's a level of kindness and dignity here that's a lot more consoling, if you will. In LA, I always felt like I had to be the tough girl and armor-plated, and certainly working as a photojournalist there for almost 30 years. But it was also such a competitive, slightly brutal culture that you could never be vulnerable. There was no space to kind of fall apart. And certainly as a photojournalist competing in a very male-dominated profession, I felt I had to prove myself to be 3 times as good and tougher and stronger. So here, somehow, happily, my armor has come down.
It was the LA Times for most of that time?
10 years with the LA Times as a full-time freelancer.
Okay.
Like a permalancer.
Were you permanently there at the time of the LA riots? Which we've talked about before, and you were part of a team that won a Pulitzer Prize, weren't you? But at that point, you were full-time there.
Yeah, but I started working for them full-time, again, as a freelancer in 1984.
Oh, okay.
So from 84 to 94. And the reason I didn't want to get on staff is I didn't want to lose the rights to my images. Staff photographers lost their rights, and I just knew instinctually, even though, I had to sacrifice, getting more salary and benefits. But now I have all the rights to my Hollywood work and everything else. And then in 92, I went to New York and met with the national editor at the New York Times, and who introduced me to the national photo editor, and he brought me in immediately to be their lead stringer out of the LA bureau. So I literally went to New York working for the LA Times and came home working for the New York Times.
So they're two very different titles, aren't they, politically, or have I got that wrong?
Yeah, politically, the New York Times is considered to be more liberal. And it just had a very different corporate structure. Like with the LA Times, I always felt incredibly insecure, like my job was on the line. The New York Times, after I did my first assignment, I actually got a handwritten note from my photo editor, and he said, he mailed it to me, and he said, you did a great job, and I almost fell over. Right. It was like, wow, I thought, that's pretty cool. I think I still have it. But with the New York Times, I just was on assignment work, so I might do 2 or 3 or 4 assignments a week for different departments. So national, I was still doing hard news. I did a lot of, science and technology. That's when computers and everything were starting to come up, so a lot of computer. And then I did a lot of social stuff. They had me covering Hollywood as well. But then also they had a reporter who I knew, who was a foreign correspondent at the same time in the Philippines, Seth Maidans, whose father was Carl Maidans. And Seth is a good friend. And then he came back to work in LA, and so he always requested me to go do stories like in Little Vietnam and all places. So those were fun, those were great. So yeah, so I worked for the New York Times for about 10, 12 years, yeah.
If you don't mind, I want to rewind a bit into the conversation we've had, because I am intrigued. And I know it's not you being flippant, because I've known you long enough now that it's the truth. There's what you said, the feeling you were expressing, this weeping thing. Now, I know what newspapers can be like, although I've never worked in newspapers in the style or the way, the degree or the intensity that you have. But I do remember for a very short time being allied to a company working for radio productions within the Sun, and what would have been the news of the world then as well, actually. And whenever you went into, would it have been Wapping then? It might have even been Wapping, I don't recall, but there was a big sign whenever you walked into the Sun. You might have been there yourself, I'm sure. And it just said, and I always found it just a bit intimidating, it said, "You are entering Sun Country." Like it was an entirely different world. And I get this feeling that maybe the LA Times, you mentioned the weeping thing and having this bravado that you had to have and be tougher than the boys, that perhaps that was responsible for it, because I know you as a very empathic person, very caring person, somebody who I would imagine, just like me, weeps at everything.
Well, that's sort of part of it, but actually it has probably everything to do with my parents and the war. World War II, and the losses that the family sustained in the war. My mother basically forbid us to cry, and she equated crying with weakness. And she would say that, and she just said, you have to be strong. So there was kind of like a no-fly zone for vulnerability. You just had to suck it up, whatever it was. And I lost some beloved friends in my early 20s and their early 20s. And my mother just expected me to be fine within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I know I'm a very strong person, and at one point I had kind of a reckoning with my own psyche, and not physic, but psyche.
You're not ever going to be able to unthink that now.
But I remembered thinking, I want to be strong, but I don't want to be hard. But I think there's a part of me that's just very strong. But also, it wasn't the LA Times per se as an institution, but I was working as a hard news photographer. So weekly I was sent down to South Central LA, and there was a dead gang member under a white sheet, or the worst ones for me were having to cover car crashes, and half the time in those days the scene was so horrific they wouldn't even publish the paper. But I can't, you don't undo what you've seen in your mind's eye. The riots were frightening. It's one thing to go halfway around the world and cover an event, but it's quite another when it's your city that's burning. And it was the expectation of, you always had to come back with a photograph. And I'm also seeing all the photographs of all the other photographers on staff and on the other, photojournalists working for news agencies. And I was competitive. I wanted to be up there with the best of them. So you had to put yourself out there without vulnerability, but still try to come away empathically. It was, and I always had that piece, but it was hard, but at the same time, I loved what I was doing. It was a lot of fun. And not the horrible stuff, but it was pre-digital. We were shooting first with black and white film, so you dash off to a photo assignment, come back to the paper, soup the film, dry it, make a quick print, RC print in the darkroom, and then run it out to the Metro desk. There was also something just fun about being a photographer. And if I was working late enough at night, because I also got a lot of society parties and then political events, they sent me out to a lot of those. Sports, I never did much sports. I didn't care, and I wasn't interested, and so I didn't compete, for those. But, late at night, you could feel the vibration from the presses rolling, because the darkroom was one floor up, and it was wonderful. It was just, I don't know, it felt meaningful. I think it felt good. And I was not very caretaking of my own soul in those days. I think I was, and also I think I was, there's an old saying, trying not to hit a moving target. I think I had so much sorrow in me from the loss of my beloved friends. But staying busy enough and adrenaline fueled enough and on the freeway enough for years, I could also just kind of put it away. And even when my mother died, I was 32 when my mom died. And I honestly don't think I grieved her until the last couple years. I just kind of put her in my pocket for 30 years and brought her with me around the world. But it was here in London with the weather and the cold and the gloom, and there's nothing you can do, and you're kind of a sitting duck for just feeling pretty wretched. But it was also a time, I don't know, I felt like I could just unbuckle all these layers of armor that I'd sort of been having, and it was hard. So I finally think I grieved my mom, even the loss of her the last year or two. And it's been interesting, and I'm finding now creatively, whether it's writing or drawing or photographing, I feel it all comes with more ease now. So obviously this emotion that I had also been holding in, and then of course the Women in War project. I had to stay composed, but it took a toll on me. But I never pivoted to my own sort of heart and soul.
Pubs is very quiet today. You all right, Barney? Huh? I don't think you would have liked London. It would have been too hot for you. You would have liked the pond. You'd have caused all sorts of problems by jumping in it, I'm sure. Marissa Roth will return shortly. Here we are walking, not with your letters today, but with cameras. And I'd still like you to send in your thoughts about photography, what you love about it, what it means to you, the journeys, the adventures that you're taking, near or far. Send your stories, your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. This year, you have been nothing short of brilliant with the assignments that you've been sending in. And I've been nothing short of slightly slow at times, uploading everything and making sure that we have a full set each month. Come on, pups, this way. Morning. I do get asked from time to time, is it okay to still send in one in such and such a month? And the answer is always a resounding yes. Say it loudly from the mountaintops of Berkshireville, yes. There will always be somebody arriving at that page or catching up with the shows. That's what it's for. Sure, you can win a flask each month, but I see it more as a constant diary of inspiration and ideas and creativity. And, as for sometimes being slightly behind, we're not the BBC or ABC, NBC, or even QVC. So bear with me, the admin of this show as it grows, or moreover as you send me more of your wonderful thoughts about life. The very fuel to the show and your photos means that I do sometimes sail against a bit of a brisker wind. But always bear with me, knowing that every single picture, every single thought you send in is important and does get read. You are, and I mean this, say it with me again, the fuel behind this show. I will have a winner for this month's one-word assignment in a moment, the one that Barney and I decided over one evening earlier this week. Well, I did. He watched. So a flask will be going somewhere in the world, and I'll remind you of this month's challenge. But first up, I am absolutely made up that we're supported this month by arthelper.ai. And if you're not absolutely sure how they might fit into your photographic life, let my studio self explain.
If you've ever thought about selling your photography online but haven't a clue where to start, I think Art Helper could probably help you because it's made for people like us. Here's how it works. You upload a photo, magically and instantly professional content is made for you, such as social media posts, email newsletters, even full Substack articles, all in your own voice. It can also generate hundreds of mock-ups for every image you upload, things like your work framed so people get a real understanding of what your photograph could look like on their wall. It helps you connect with the right buyers and even suggests pricing based on your market. And unlike most AI tools, it has an art protection guarantee, which means something very important: your images are never used for AI training. Free to try, and Art Helper is giving our listeners a special deal. Go to arthelper.ai, use the code PHOTOWALK and get 30 days free of the pro version. I'll make sure to put a link on the show page, but also now there's a video that my friend Brandon at Art Helper made to help us understand and be able to see how the thing works. So if you go to the show page, you'll see Brandon explaining and showing exactly how this could work for you and I. So great way to start selling your art or growing the business you already have. And thank you, arthelper.ai, for your belief in this show.
So to the one-word assignment. Robin, or Batman. What was that expression? Here comes your challenge for this month. I'll remind you of how you can take part in a moment, of course. Gary Ramage, the photojournalist and all-round good photographer bloke. What is the word we are challenging with for this month?
I think I'll go with tranquility.
Oh, perfect. Tranquility. And I like that particularly for this show. We talk a lot about the quiet of photographs.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think of one of your pictures that would show total tranquility. I'm going to choose one from the war zone, actually, which we talked about in your interview, which is the young lad, the 20-year-old lad, 21-year-old lad, cuddled into his bomb disposal worker dog, keeping warm together in the night.
It's a beautiful picture, and yeah, I don't normally say that about my pictures. I don't really talk about my pictures, but it is. I've got it as it's a massive sort of 3 meter by 2 meter picture on my wall. And part of the reason it's in the dining room is when we have dinner with guests, it's the first thing they see. It's the talking point.
Do you go out with your camera to try and find tranquility at all? Are you somebody who looks for the quiet?
Yeah, probably first thing in the morning. Like, we're coming into winter now. So normally what I'll do, I'll walk down the driveway and I'll just take photos of frost and peace and quiet, before I go off to my job. And it just sets me on my path for the day.
Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide if you can. The dimensions, it's not 2,500 on the long side, it's 2,500 wide. Please, if you can do that, otherwise full res is fine. I'll do the heavy lifting. A few thoughts about the image that you've made can help sometimes tell a story. No watermarks, no borders, but do include links to your socials or a website so we can share more of your work. And please send full URLs. Don't just say @wonderfulphotographer, because when I copy paste those links, it does save time just to have the full URL. So if you can help me with the admin there, you are a double star. You really are.
Right, a word from the studio to say congratulations to Craig Wilson, who will be receiving a show flask for his entry of the half-sunken boat in June's assignment, which was set by Paul Hudson. The challenge was Relic, and the mist or the fog and Craig's isolation of a boat that was once important in somebody's life and now lies abandoned as a relic from a sailing past is a picture I've gone for, and not just because I like the half-sunken boat pictures that I make along the towpath sometimes. This was a tricky one because on a sliding scale of time, it may not have been the oldest relic in the collection of fabulous pictures you sent in, but there was a definite feeling to this one. This feeling of solitude and something being claimed by time. And that air of mystery, it just got me. So well done, Craig. A not-so-old flask is on its way. Right, let's return to London for my conversation this week with Marissa Roth.
We've spoken a number of times. Do you know how many times you've been on the show now? I think next to Giles, our dear friend Giles, who sends his regards, by the way. There we go. I've remembered to do it on microphone, and that's good because Giles will now know I did actually do it. He sends his regards. But I think next to Giles, you've probably been one of the most regular contributors to this title. And across that time, we've spoken about women in war. We've talked about Tibet. We've talked about the Atlantic crossing, which we will come back to. But I want to come to women in war in a second. But I also want to thank you for something that I've just ripped off from you, to be honest. And that's your wonderful phrase, sketchbook image, sketchbook picture. I started calling it, by the way, because you call them your sketchbook photographs, your sketchbook images. Yeah. I was originally calling them my something and nothings, and I much preferred sketchbook. And I actually started calling them just sketchbooks until somebody wrote in and complained that I didn't finish the sentence each time. Anyway, thank you for that. Why did you call them a sketchbook picture? What is it about a photograph that becomes a sketchbook of your life?
I just want to qualify that and say that those images I think that I was referring to were images that I would take with my little ancient Contax camera, which is a lovely little titanium beast from the mid 1990s. It's in your pocket. I pull it out. I keep it loaded with Tri-X, and it just kind of is an easy record. Whether I was traveling or just walking around, especially during the pandemic when I was in my shoebox here, I would go out walking with it. And I actually did a whole little series. It's on my website. It's called Cantata, which is kind of my photographic memory of the pandemic. And I think it really helped me to pull me out of my own whatever pandemic intensity and gave me just being in the present, but it's an easy camera to use, but it's still serious enough that I was shooting with film. So it just felt like they're more like moments, whereas I think when I'm photographing more formally, let's say for a project, so coming back to Tibet, I had to decide before the first trip to Tibet what film I actually wanted to use. And I knew I didn't want to photograph in black and white. And I had seen enough images that other photographers had taken from Tibet to know, sort of get a general sense of the color palette there. it's very primary and secondary. It's the prayer flags and I hadn't shot Kodachrome in many years and found some Kodachrome and did a test and decided that was it. It was always said that the blacks in Kodachrome were the truest photographic black. So, again, that was very deliberate. My choice of cameras was very deliberate because I was worried that I would really look like a photojournalist and I would have trouble with the authorities there. So I wanted to kind of fly under the radar. And
the contacts was perfect for that.
I actually didn't shoot the contacts in Tibet. I shot I think I took 1 or 2 Nikons with 2 lenses. And then I actually bought a little Leica, sort of a comparable to the contacts, but it was just a small sort of quote-unquote happy snap, but it's also a little titanium thing. But I could be much more sort of surreptitious, shooting from the hip with it.
Yeah.
And it actually freed me up because it was an autofocus. I could set my f-stop and shutter speed. But I didn't have to look like a photographer. And actually on the second trip, which was in 2010, which was after the Tibetan uprising of 2008. I was shooting at the Jokon Monastery, and there was a Chinese photographer with a long lens photographing this vat of yak butter with flames coming from it. And I thought, I could tell he wasn't a tourist. And, it was my last day there, so I was like relieved that my film didn't get confiscated or something.
Could that have happened?
Oh yeah, who knows? They were following us, and actually our guide was summoned back to his village the morning we were supposed to leave. He had to be at his village at 8 a.m. So he actually couldn't be with myself and my friend who I was traveling with. And so it was just our driver took us to the airport.
Right.
So they wanted to separate him from us.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very upsetting, actually.
Yeah. Women in War, where are we then? Because we've had lots of conversations about this. Last time we talked, we were at the point of closure. But I know you, and please, for those that haven't heard about the project, it would probably be a wise idea now to explain a little bit about the idea behind it. It's been 3 decades? Four decades. Oh my word. Okay, has it found closure? We'll start with what it is, though.
One Person Crying, Women in War is a 41-year project. Technically,
41. Right.
The first photo dates to 1984.
All right.
It's a project that came about quite organically. In 1988, I was in Pakistan doing some stories with an LA Times foreign correspondent, and I was working with him. And I had concluded my assignments, and I was a young, hungry freelance photojournalist, and met with an amazing woman named Kathy Gannon, who was the head of the Associated Press in Islamabad. And we were batting around story ideas, and she said, well, there's a story that no one cares about. And this was at the tail end of the war between the Soviet Union and Afghanistan. And she said, there's 100,000 Afghan war widows, and nobody cares about this story. And I thought, well, I care. And I don't remember actually how I made it happen. So my reporter had to go back to the Philippines, and so I was in Islamabad, and then all I can sort of remember is meeting up with a French journalist, and we shared a car to like the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we stumbled on this place called Tal, T-H-A-L. There was a hotel there, and I can't, there's some memories because I think it was such an intense time for me, but I just walked into this refugee camp, and as a woman I could walk into the women's section, and I came upon this family, 2 sisters and their children, and I couldn't speak to them. I didn't have a translator. And I just literally was speaking to them through my camera and gesturing is it okay to take your photograph? So I did. That other journalist and I made it up to Peshawar, Pakistan, on another border. And again, I sort of remember how I got there, but I was staying at this crazy hotel. I think it was called the Green Hotel. It was probably the scariest place I've ever been. There was all these men sort of lurking around, and at night I barricaded my door with a chair, and I had actually bought a full Shawwal kameez, the tunic and the huge top and a scarf for my head. So I was wearing probably 8 yards of fabric just to cover up, looking like a female. And again, I went into one of the camps and had access again in the women's section. And something was happening to me during that time, that week. I just felt like some part of me was waking up. I was so pulsating with a feeling photographing that I'd never really had before. I always hoped to find that feeling. And I probably had it in LA working as a photojournalist here and there, but never sustained like that.
Yeah.
And then I came back to Manila, processed the film, and it was like, oh my gosh, something happened, something transformed. So they redispatched the reporter back to Pakistan so that he could report the story. And then about a month later, the paper published it on the front page of the LA Times.
So the paper obviously saw the value in this immediately.
Immediately, yeah. And it was a transformation for me. What I didn't know then, which I of course know now, was something woke up in me. And then I didn't really do another subject related to women in war until 1999, when I was invited to go to Albania during the war in Kosovo. I was doing work with the Hospital Council of Southern California and UCLA. So they invited me to go on this medical mission to Albania. And I decided, my book on the Philippines had just come out, and I was pretty burned out, and I just thought, okay, I don't want to take an assignment. I'm just going to do this for myself. And then that's when I decided to try to address rape as a weapon of war. And so I started again. I had access to refugee women and started photographing. And again, something was like waking up in me. And then I think it was 2000 was when I thought, I want to do this project. And I started writing grants, which I never got. I'm terrible at grant writing. I've never gotten a grant. It's pretty pathetic. And
I don't think anybody I've spoken to has ever got one. So please don't feel pathetic in this process.
Yeah, I feel better.
Who are these people that get these grants?
Thank you, Neil. I feel better then. And then in 2000, oh my God, the years are just flying by.
Yeah.
In 2002, I had the opportunity to go to Japan with a dear friend of mine who's she started a whole food movement in America, Sonoko Sakai. But she was going to Japan on a food story for Saveur magazine on spec, and she said, do you want to come with me? And I said yes, in a heartbeat. And I'd just gone through my first divorce, so any excuse to get out of LA, I was happy. And then I thought, okay, I've always wanted to go to Hiroshima to interview Japanese women who survived the A-bomb. So that was really the first time that it was a proactive decision, my destination. It wasn't just a story I'd stumbled on. And so I went to Japan with Sonoko, and then I already had made contacts for assistance with interviews and translation in Hiroshima. And I went, and again, it was just something was waking up in me.
It's not always widows of war, though, is it? Because the project, we've already talked about one nuanced change from what it originally was, but there's another part where you went to speak to Gurkha's wives.
I'd like to. Yeah.
You haven't done that bit yet?
No, I was supposed to go, and then it just...
so one of the conversations we've had maybe was on the cusp of you going.
Yes, and then that trip got...
Oh no!
Didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah, it was just the timing was all wrong.
But there are other stories that aren't widows of war.
Oh yes.
Many.
So I mean, again, the project was never that structured in my mind. It was more. So after Hiroshima, I actually made a list of potential destinations that I wanted to do, sort of like a shopping list, So instead of oranges and eggs, it was like, okay, Bosnia, Cambodia, Vietnam. So this list. Yeah. And so then I just started ticking off my list. And so in 2002, went to Hiroshima. 2005, went to Northern Ireland. And again, it took a while to find ways to make contacts, but I was doing a lot with the Museum of Tolerance in LA, and so somebody who worked there was from Northern Ireland, and he was able to give me names, because I did a lot of prep work, to figure out, because I didn't want to waste time once I get to a place, trying to find resources. So I wanted sort of my ducks in a row so I could land and start working, because these were expensive trips and I was self-funding it.
Yeah.
And then I read a book. I think the next subject was Germany, Berlin. There was a book called A Woman in Berlin, and it was an anonymous author, and it was this German woman. They think she was a journalist. She may have been a photographer, but she kept a diary during the siege of Berlin when Berlin was taken over, towards the end of the war. And it was put into quadrants, American, French, British, and Russian. And there was systematic raping of German women for months. And this woman, she kept a diary, but it wasn't tawdry. I mean, it was very matter of fact. And I read this and I thought, okay, I've addressed the Holocaust. I need to be, democratic and tell the story from the other side. So again, these subjects kind of started piecing themselves together. And actually, it was a woman in Londonderry, Northern Ireland, Charlotte Russell, who kind of gave me the whole key to the project in 2005. She said she was Protestant. She is. I hope she's still alive. Her husband was a policeman who was killed by an IRA sniper when she was pregnant with their second child. And she said to me, I bet you're finding women are the same everywhere. And when she said it, it was, again, to repeat myself, it was like the key to the whole project. Because I thought, she's right, because I think war reduces everybody to the fundamentals, survival, food, health, hearth, safety, and then in the aftermath, you start rebuilding your life. How do you do that, piece by piece?
One of the, it's impossible to pick out one. Well, I'm going to pick out one picture, but it seems to be a picture that's just stuck with me. It's a detailed picture, actually. It was from one of the American mothers. You almost gave me a look then like you expected me to say this. It was, what do they call these letters? The final, in case of death, goodbye letter. And that hit me like oh my word. Maybe because my boys were beginning to grow older, and I was putting myself in that, I don't know, maybe not, but that situation where you'd never want to read a letter like this.
In America, every service person who is deployed for whatever, war or security, so every time they have a tour of duty, they're required to write an in case of death goodbye letter, which then they take with them, and it's with their belongings. So even if they've done 3 or 4 tours of duty, there'll be 3 or 4 different letters. So
they write a fresh one every tour. Okay.
Every tour. And so I was following a story in the New York Times about Lima Company, which is a Marine Reserve unit in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
And because I think as I was growing with the project and trying to maybe focus on different aspects of war, let's say widows, refugees, the long view of war from like the Japanese women who survived Hiroshima, that was, almost 60 years on. I thought, okay, how do I address a huge story like the war in Iraq, the American war in Iraq? And I thought I have to find a small story that exemplifies the bigger story. And so I was following this story in the New York Times, and because I worked for them, I called the reporter, and he was very gracious and actually gave me his contact information at the Marine Reserve Unit. This wonderful, he was a Columbus cop, Master Sergeant Walter, and he volunteered at the Marine Reserve Unit. And I called him up, I told him what I'd like to do, and he said, well, I think you should come over Veterans Day, which is in November. And so he helped with the protocol of getting clearance with the Marine Corps and all of that. So I showed up, and I had no idea if any of the mothers or widows would agree. And they put me in a room, and there was a bereavement session going on in the room next to them, because this had just happened that summer. So in May and then in August of 2005, there were 2 roadside bombings of armored personnel carrier, and so I think it was 26 men out of 1 unit were killed that summer. Yeah, so I'm sitting there alone in this room, and then I hear the bereavement session end, and then they all came into the room I was in, and I then had to make a presentation. And so in other places, I would bring photographs from some of the other women that I'd photographed in Northern Ireland or the Afghan women, and I would show them to these women and tell them about the project and then ask them if it was okay. And then I would pass around my reporter's notebook and ask them to write down their name and contact information. So one of the women who agreed, her name is Jody Davids, and I went to her home, and her husband is hovering in the background in the photograph. I think he just wanted to make sure she was okay. And their son had gotten killed in August, so this is in November. And as she was speaking, she mentioned the in case of death letter, and I always knew about these. And then I said, "Can I see it?" And she brought it out, and then it was like, all I remember is I had this like weird like photographer's creative moment where I thought, okay, how do I take an interesting photograph? And then I caught myself, and I thought, just take a photograph of it. You don't need to be creative. It doesn't have to be extra special. It is what it is. And so that's when there was a beam of sunlight literally on the chair next to me, and then I put it down and photographed it. And I didn't worry that half of it was out of focus. It didn't matter. It still was the gist of it. So, yeah.
There is still an unanswered question, though. Have you found closure? Is it finished? I'm suggesting now it's not, because the project that I thought you'd done with the Gurkhas still remains one to do. It's a tick that is not yet made.
In the interim, since I think we had that interview, I did do 2 more subjects. One is Ukrainian women who were refugees here.
Yes.
I spent a good part of 2024 photographing about 20 Ukrainian women and some daughters, granddaughters. So that was, and I did that in conjunction with the Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain. I contacted them initially just to help with contacts, and then they said, "Oh, will you do a bigger project, and we'd love to have this." So anyway, I ended up going full on in that. And then concurrent to that, another subject that I'd always wanted to do was the Channel Islands, to tell the story of the occupation. Which is not well known even here in the UK.
Well, it's so interesting you should say that. The last time I went to Jersey, I went into, that cliffside.
Yeah.
They had an exhibition in there, really good. It's I think that's a hospital, a field hospital, isn't it?
I haven't been there.
Yeah, and there was an exhibition, and it had a huge story about the occupation, which I'd never learned about at school, and it was almost like a part of these islands that was forgotten.
Well, but it's definitely not forgotten about with them. It's still very much in the present. I don't know, talking about closure, they have not had any closure. And again, I think World War II is still a subject that I've had a chance to tap into, because there's still women who are alive who were children. So that literally, I did my 3rd trip there in May. So to answer your question, Neil, finally, yes, I do see the main, whatever you want to call this, the main symphony of the Women in War project, which I date back to 1984, and I'll tell you about that why, to now. Because I feel there's really not another subject in this context that I want to address. But I am aiming to do, which will include the Gurkha widows and sisters, is I'm trying to do a documentary feature film based on the project, and which will also talk a bit about my journey as a photographer and also my own family's war
You've had
history.
some interest in that, haven't you?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that?
Nothing substantial, but I'm now that the bigger project is sort of off my back and out of my soul, if you will, now I can put the documentary, trying to find a producer and get it off the ground. I can put that on the front burner. So my aim is to go to 3 or 4 places that I haven't been to before. Yes, Nepal is one of them for the Gurkha women. Rwanda, El Salvador, and Sri Lanka. Those are the 4 places. And then I'd like to go back to Pakistan, where it all began. There's a little girl in one of my photographs. I named her Amira. And she's the little girl with her head shaved, and where she's just looking at me quite directly. I never knew her name because I didn't have a translator. And over the years, over the decades, when the project felt fallow or I just felt kind of beleaguered by it, I always had this photograph somewhere in my home and wherever I was, and I just felt like she was my mascot, like she was just like, you can do this, just imploring me. And so I'd like to try to go back and see if I can find her.
Oh my goodness.
But she'll
that's a task, isn't it? If you don't know her name, you don't know what she looks like now.
Well, I have been back in touch with Kathy Gannon, who is now the former head of the Associated Press. And I asked her about this. I said, is this like an insane idea, or do you think it's possible? And she said, it's totally possible. The camps are still there. And she said, I'll help you. I'll take you into the camps. Let's see if we can find her. So I think in a way, I see the documentary as the capstone to the whole project. And even if I don't find her, it's still, in a way, the circle of my journey. That this project it's been, half of my life.
But you're still only 35. There's time to have another long one now, surely.
That's true. But I think through it all, I've come to a place of peace in my own heart, in terms of my own family's war history, the trauma, the pain, and I think I always sort of had like I don't know how to say it, like a hollow space inside of me, and that's gone now. And I think somehow I've come to, throughout these decades and maturing, and so I think yes, it's that part is done. The documentary I'd like to do, and then there's some other ancillary initiatives I'd like to do that also relate to the project.
What does it become, though? Surely a book?
Definitely a book. And then after that, we'll see what happens.
I've got this rather romantic picture in my head of Amira, which means...
Light.
In
Pashto.
Light in Pashto, right. I've got this picture of Amira standing, possibly with you, in front of a huge picture that you originally made to start or is that a bit cliche?
A little bit.
Is it?
It's okay. I mean, I appreciate
I mean well.
No, I know you mean well, but I think for me, I can't even think about that.
No.
For me, it's I only have to stay in the idea of it, and
I've gone a bit Hollywood, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I forgive you. You want my autograph?
But oh my word, when this project is done, well, I look forward to the book, really. I look forward to being at the front of the signing queue.
I think I'll give you a copy, Neil, because you're a good friend.
And we'll rejoin Marissa Roth very soon. We've been talking about travel today. You don't say, Neil. I do. And if it feels like you like to walk, camera in hand, somewhere else in the world, somewhere new, somewhere stirring, that feels like it could be more than just a dream right now, then maybe this moment is your sign. In 2026, we're travelling together, you and I, to India in March, exploring the rich colours and chaos of Kolkata and the spiritual calm of Varanasi. And in June, we have a printing and walking retreat in the Scottish Highlands, slightly different to the one we regularly do. And in September, we're travelling to Mongolia to spend time in this fantastical, mystical land and the eagle hunters. We're registering interest now, but I tell you what, let me take a few moments, like I did last week, to tell you more about our plans.
This podcast celebrates its 500th edition soon, which I'm going to be un-Englishly very proud of, if I may say so for a moment. And you've brought me and this show to that by your support in terms of being a member in our Extra Mile community, which is linked to on the website, the purchase of our ebook called Why? A Sketchbook of Life, and by being a wonderful travelling companion as I walk with guides and friends and visit far-off places. It's always far off for someone, of course. We have 3 wonderful ways to travel with this show, 3 unique, wildly precious experiences. This September, in a couple of months' time, we travel together for a retreat to Scotland. Escape with us to Scotland's Black Isle. 5 days of mindful photo walking, forest writing, darkroom printing, sound storytelling on a working soft fruit farm. It's more than photography, it's a retreat for your senses, where creative community meets nature's rhythms and time slows down, I like to think, alongside like-minded souls. We have our daily challenges, yes, and each evening we eat together with wonderfully home-prepared food as we look back at the day experienced. Next year, in March 2026, we return to India. Over 9 immersive days in March 2026, this isn't just a photography trip, it's a creative awakening. In Kolkata, we'll drift through steaming street markets as they awaken. Ride the famous yellow taxis of the city and pause for chai with families. We go to the largest flower market and photograph a wrestling story. And then in Varanasi, we capture shimmering Ganges dawn rituals, saffron-robed pilgrims, and the centuries-old pulse of ghats and temple life. Small groups, local guides, afternoon edit sessions, journaling guidance for platforms such as Substack. It is a journey that goes way beyond the lens to awaken sensitivity, story, and definitely spirit. And then in September 2026, from the moment we land in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia begins to whisper its secrets. What a place! But it's in the wide-open Altai where its soul reveals itself. We will trace ancient trade routes and Buddhist monasteries to the golden silence of the steppe. We'll explore temple ruins scented with time and stand shoulder to shoulder with eagle hunters, watching their golden birds return to outstretched arms, photographing and documenting their life. We'll witness the riot of colour and tradition of the Eagle Festival. We'll work with farmers, live alongside them, creating photo stories of the like you won't have done before, I'm sure. And we photograph the streets of the city too. It's raw, it's real, and it's a visual journey deep into Mongolia's timeless rhythm. The world doesn't wait. The stories, the faces, the fading light, they're all out there, waiting to be noticed by you and I. Traveling like this isn't about ticking boxes. From day one, we've always wanted to work differently on this show. We'd like you to feel something about your shift. You go to make pictures, yes, but what you bring back shapes how you see everything else from that moment on. Some journeys just don't end when you get home. Go to photowalk.show and all the links for these incredible 3 journeys are there. Scotland only has one place on the first week left, mind.
The afternoon sound of a gentle sprinkler in the background. All these textures. Talking of textures, and I'm sorry that sounds like I was shoehorning something in, and I really wasn't, but I hadn't seen this work. Iceland Poppies. I thought I followed your work quite well. Iceland Poppies mentally is a really important project for you. I know that there's some nuances to it that we can't talk about, but mental health and photography and art is something that's always been very close to you.
Yes, I would have to say, I think I would call it creative expression as a way of living and a way of being. And I didn't always understand it from that kind of a core definition. So the Iceland poppies, so being an LA girl, the sprinklers actually remind me of home. So I am still adapting to the weather here. And so I find, like a lot of people, February and March challenging here.
February for me is a really challenging month. And I'm British.
Yeah.
I've lived with it.
That actually makes me feel better, too. So rather than fight it, I've tried to figure out how to work with it. And for a few years, I was just floored by the beauty of Iceland poppies, which I bought in some flower shops, and then just randomly photographed them with my old LA phone, which had a great little camera. And didn't sort of think anything of it, but loved it, and it was a bit of a diversion. And then a work friend in New York suggested to me that I actually take a more serious look at this subject and to use a quote-unquote real camera.
Proper camera.
So I took her good advice to heart and started finding, Iceland poppies in 2 flower shops here in Chelsea, and immediately sort of got back into it. So I did this little setup by a north-facing window, and I have like this little bookshelf, and I wanted a black background for the poppies, and so I have a lovely black wool pashmina shawl, and so that was my background, which I tucked under a book, and just started in. But my criteria, I'd learned a lot about the poppies on my first few forays into them over the years, that some of them, they're all beautiful, but some of them are more beautiful than others. They'll have different colorations, and I loved the ones that almost had these like genetic glitches, which look like flaws, but they're just sort of wonderful. And I thought, okay, I don't care if there's bruising or there's weirdness or they're missing a petal or anything. So I started tucking into them and found that they were giving me sort of a lifeline to survive the doom and the gloom of February and March. And so I enlisted 2 flower shops locally, and just would go buy. First, I was more modest. I'd buy like 4 or 5 poppies, and then one Saturday I decided to go all out, and I bought 20 of them. But knowing full, because some of them were still buds, so I couldn't tell if they were going to be interesting or not once they opened. Yeah. And also I was so worried that the growing season window was going to close. So I get a little bit, probably I don't know if I've never been diagnosed as being compulsive, but I knew I'm very deadline oriented. So I knew I had this short window, and just started photographing them, and they just somehow lit up my little world, and it was literally in a tiny corner, in my flat. So it was for all the work I've done around the world and overseas, to do this little project literally at home was an amazing thing. It felt almost like a metaphor for all of the sort of internal, sort of emotional work or reckoning or having time to just think about the past as I move into the future. But no, I probably do have trauma-acquired PTSD from all of the work I've done, what I saw in LA and elsewhere, taking on all the stories. And then also we have pretty horrendous war history. My father's parents, grandmother, and an uncle were killed in a massacre during World War II in 1942, killed on the doorstep of their home. And I think my parents were already in LA, and I knowing they were classic, old world Europeans, they just sort of stood straight up and marched into the future, and probably, well, I'm sure they were brokenhearted and traumatized, but their emotional sort of range was fixed. It was just about being now and forward and doing the best we can and not withering in the face of any of it. So, yeah. So I think, I'm sure, as I have 2 brothers and myself, I'm sure there was some inherited trauma. I was in therapy for many years, not necessarily talking about that, not every week for years, but, once in a while. And, that was certainly a topic. But I think for myself, I always had this creative thing in me, even as a kid. I mean, as a kid, I have, just memories of myself sitting on my bedroom floor, drawing and painting and making furniture out of cardboard. I used to make my own doll's clothes, and I was just always creative. So I was lucky in that was my sanctuary, my safety net, and I think in a way it still is. It's what pulls me through.
You just reminded me of the fact that I used to have thought about this for many, many years. As a child, I used to model small things like little chairs and tables. I was fascinated by this thick card that Dad used to have, actually, as part of his job, and I used to model things with it. I used to be delighted when he'd come home with thick card and I would score them. Isn't that interesting? I'd never thought about that.
Actually, you just reminded me. So I would have those thick cardboard, but they came in when my dad's shirts went to the laundry.
Yeah. And
they were folded, and the cardboard came in the shirt.
That's right. These were a bit thicker. They had like a foam on the inside.
Okay.
They were, yeah. Sorry, I've just gone off on a complete tangent as you were... Well, you're back to art, actually, aren't you? You started painting.
Yeah, I've started drawing with ink again.
Drawing with ink, right.
Yeah, I guess it's paint, but I think it's still drawing. But yeah, I started again. I've been circling, sort of doing that for like a long, long time, buying inks and brushes and then just kind of looking at them. And then...
These are very Japanese, they're Japanese inspired drawings, paintings.
Yeah, I mean, I love working with sumi brushes, and then...
You have to explain what one of those is.
So a sumi brush is a type of an ink. It's Japanese or Chinese that's used primarily for calligraphy painting.
That's why the brush strokes that you have remind me of that calligraphy or calligraphic style. Is there such a word, or have I invented one?
Yeah, it's a good one. For me, I was a graphic design major at university. Yes. Yeah. But for me, type and graphics and written has always been kind of my thing. So this has just been a natural, although these are more just strokes of emotion, if you will, or expression or an idea. So like one little series I did was in response to the LA fires in January. It's a little series I call Blue Sun LA Fires. So, but again, I think I was desperate to find some way to pull the emotions out and just make them more tangible and more manageable. So I think having, like you, access to this sort of natural creative expression. And I think everybody has it. It's just usually beaten out of everybody in elementary school, or it's just never nurtured or nourished. But everybody can put a pencil to paper.
You mentioned LA fires. Ted Socke is your friend. I remember talking with him. We spoke, actually, at the same time. He was in the thick of it every single day, photographing those LA fires. I remember there was a disconnect for you, not emotionally, but in the miles that you were away from it.
No, I was grateful not to be there photographing, but heartsick for the destruction, what people were going through. It's still an incredibly traumatic event. I mean, it's still my hometown. LA is my city, but I made a decision to leave, a very critical decision. So this is my home now, and I feel it's my heart home as well as my literal home.
Well, it is your heart home. For a long time, so I've been a photographer professionally for less years than you have. That's because I've had two very different careers, broadcasting and then photography. It took me a long time into photography to find my, if you like, heart home. I didn't call myself a photographer for a long time because I just thought, well, this will all pass. What's this? What's this all about? But now I've been a photographer for more years than I've been a broadcaster. And so that heart home is quite important, I think. It's interesting to hear you say that London is now that place.
Yeah, I feel that I can be my true self here for the first time in my life.
Interesting.
I can be...
Even though it is so desperate in February.
Yeah, even though I'm desperate in February. But then if you talk to people, everybody's desperate.
Yeah. Call me up, we can be desperate together.
So
we can compare the horrible views out of our windows.
Well, at first I thought it was me, like being in a horrible depression. You know, you get kind of this weird anxiety. And
there's that SAD, isn't there? Seasonal.
Yeah.
What is it? Seasonal adjustment or something disorder?
Seasonal, yeah.
SAD. Yeah.
SAD. But then I realized, okay, everybody's dealing with it in some way or the other. But then again, it was like, I felt like, okay, the onus is on me to find my way through it. You know, you didn't want to go out. I mean, the weather's garbage. I mean, I was too sort of fragmented to read. You know, I didn't want to watch any movies. And then it reminded me when I was a kid, back to when I was a kid, I remember Sundays sometimes could be so boring. And my parents weren't prone to like, oh, okay, let's go here or there. That wasn't who they were. And I remember Sundays was when my imagination would kick in. And so here, the same thing happened. I mean, I would start writing, actually, like a sentence would come to me. And
on a Sunday?
On a Sunday.
Yeah.
And again, it came, the source was like, okay, a little bit of feeling like there was no movement, there was no inspiration to go anywhere. I didn't want to deal with whatever it was, dealing with the rain or the cold or putting on 4,000 layers of clothing. You just wanted to like hibernate and be cozy. And then it was like all of a sudden the writing would start ticking, and then like 3 hours were gone. So it forced me to go inward, which has been of value.
I never liked Sundays either. Sunday evenings I found a very melancholic time. Oh yeah. And I wasn't I didn't hate school as such. It wasn't a torrid time for me or anything, but it wasn't my favorite place in the world, and I'd much rather be constructing a Lego palace
oh my God, that's exactly. I mean, I lived for Lego.
Yeah.
Lived for Lego.
I had a big bag of it. My late auntie, I lost her earlier this year, she made me a big bag that you could just put all your Lego in, and taught me to take stuff out of the boxes and mix it all up. That was Auntie Judy. Thank you, Auntie Judy, I say, looking skyward. But Sunday afternoons for me, it was, and then worst of all, then Songs of Praise. We only had 3 television channels and a 4th one that just had snow. I know in America you had about 150, but Songs of Praise, BBC One would come on, and I'd think, oh, Sunday over, bath time, bedtime, school.
Well,
even Lego wouldn't save that moment.
Well, I have to say, growing up in LA where it was sunny 310 days a year and pretty temperate, that was never an issue.
No. Well, it wasn't in Bengio where I grew up, which I'm sure nobody in LA has ever heard of. While we're talking about LA, it's a real left turn at the traffic lights, this, but you did say something to me that I think is really interesting about mental health and LA, and I'm trying to build I'm just trying to get the connection on what you were talking about, but it did seem very important.
Well, I think, again, it's just tracing back, a handful of months, trying, again, through creative expression, to access, whether it's emotion, sorrow, fear, whatever the thing is. I think the trick is to just get it out, and whatever that is, whether it's cooking or knitting or, for me, doing something creative. When I'm really in like a creative flow, it transcends everything else. It transcends time, it transcends sorrow, I mean, it was interesting. I was shooting weddings for a while in LA, and I was committed to shoot a wedding the day after my older brother died.
Oh my.
And the funeral was the next day in Phoenix. And I photographed the wedding.
Oof.
And flew into Phoenix on a very early, like 7 a.m. flight. And I remember one of my nieces looked at me and she said, "I can't believe you photographed a wedding yesterday." And I said, "Of course I did. I was committed. You know, they paid me thousands of dollars." And, you know, she just seemed shocked that I could actually function. And it was like, of course you function. I don't know. There was no way I wouldn't have done it.
Creative function, you mean?
No, just I had a job to do, and I had to do a good job, and I you know, told these people I would show up that day, and I did my job, and I did a very nice. It was a beautiful wedding and good photographs, but you know, I don't know, was that called compartmentalizing or just rising above? I don't know how to articulate that.
You know, you and I have so many similar stories. Didn't realise you were a Lego fan as well, but I photographed a wedding and I knew my mother was going to die that night. I photographed a wedding on the day my mother died.
Yeah.
I did get to the hospital to say goodbye to her, and my Auntie Judy, who I'll mention again, who Look Upwards again, actually that day was my sanctuary, in that she said, "You've got to do this, and I'll keep talking to Mum. You make sure you get here when you can," and which I did, and that kicked in for me. Actually, I'd committed to these people, and I said I'd do something. I don't know whether I should feel disappointed. This is the first time I've mentioned it on the microphone. I don't know whether I should feel slightly disappointed, or maybe just accept that not everybody really cares or has the same empathy. But the bride and groom, who knew it was happening, they never asked me what happened in the end.
You know, I've learned, you know, to give a wide berth to people, and not everybody is hardwired like you and I, and that's their...
Or soft-wired.
Or soft-wired, or, you know, I feel everything, sometimes too much, but I think that's who I am, that's how I was created. It's made me a good photographer. I've had incredible experiences meeting people around the world that have changed my life, that have created me. You know, I mean, one of the most amazing moments during the Women in War project was in Vietnam. And as an American, I had a tremendous amount of, like, complicated emotions going there, you know, because the war, what happened, of course, guilt. And I didn't know what the reception would be, you know, as an American going there. And I was a little nervous about it. Do they hate us? What's it gonna be? And when I was in Hanoi, I started in Hanoi, and I went to this, I don't know, it was a shop or something, and I bought some stuff, and the two young women there were like so excited I was an American, and I was like, "Hi, okay." And I thought, okay, I feel better now. And then when I was in Hue, I met an amazing Vietnamese woman who had been a student peace activist in Vietnam.
Oh.
And I never knew there was like an anti-war movement in Vietnam.
No, nor did I.
She got arrested and then imprisoned for her activism. She was beaten and put into this horrendous sort of prison. Oh. And so we had this interview through my translator. And then somehow she and I just like connected, you know, on just a feeling level. And when I left, she gave me a hug that was so strong, I thought my back was going to break. And it was just like, oh my God, thank you, goodbye, you know, bye, and hug. And it was so meaningful to me. So I think having an empathetic heart and an open heart, like I say to people, I travel with an open mind and an open heart.
That's the other one of yours, I remember. I've never claimed that, by the way. That's yours. Always will be.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. I appreciate that. But
Though I do mention it, you are immediately associated with that.
But I think I'm willing to keep it open. Not for everybody. Believe me, there's some people that get a closed heart and a closed mouth.
This sounds a bit conflicted.
Well, no, it's just I read people. I mean, if a person's going to be toxic or nasty or aggressive, I'm not quite as. I don't. I'm from LA. I have a tough side. Not hard, but I do have a tough side.
There's a radar.
Oh yeah, it's hyper tuned. But I think for those truly genuine, warm-hearted, sincere, caring, loving moments, I mean, those have enriched my life, and they've also taught me, because everything we do, even every photograph, is a reflection of who we are and what we're experiencing. So it's also taught me, like, who am I, and actually who do I want to be?
It's not exactly been a theme as such, but it's certainly a subject that I've seen discussed more, or perhaps more letters have come into the show about this than I think we've ever had in the 5 years of the show. Losing one's mojo. And I know that you've mentored photographers, and I know it's something that, well, we've already discussed actually, that you've had to come to terms with that yourself when you thought, well, what do I do now? Where am I going with my creativity? Am I creative anymore? What is this all about? What do you say to your students, those that you mentor, about finding your mojo, about recovering your enthusiasm?
That's a really interesting question. I've never been asked that before. I think at heart I'm a very type A impatient person.
Right.
Very, very driven, and working for 30 years in LA, I was in high demand, so I was always in forward motion.
Yes.
And of course, life brings ebbs and flows.
Of course it does.
And I think what I've learned is to accept that rather than panic with it. Because even in those moments of ebbing, is that a word, or the ebb?
Yeah.
There's something to be valued in it. And I realized after I did my first book on the Philippines, again, it was 10 years of photography, and then the book came out, I felt like an empty vessel. And I realized that when you put that much into, time, heart, soul, effort, that there has to be a time when you somehow replenish yourself. It's hard, I need to work. I'm not independently wealthy, and so, figuring out how to make the money come in, things like that.
Do those practicalities, do they weigh you down like an anchor? You seem to me to be somebody that would say, wouldn't necessarily suffer from that. You've got this get-go about you that believes that there's always a corner to turn that will offer up something.
I know, I don't suffer it, I worry.
Do you?
But then I do start to make things happen. And I,
Driven.
Very driven. Very, very driven. And now I have the benefit of my own history, which is I know if I start to make things happen, things happen. Despite everything I've seen, I'm an eternal optimist. So I'm always hopeful. And also, I have an adventurer's heart. I can't wait for the next adventure. I can't wait to get on the road. I can't wait, to see something beautiful.
Well, sometimes those adventures are, and we've discussed this already, poppies, not necessarily on the road.
Yeah, I mean, they came to me. I mean, I went out and got them, but then I was like euphoric when I would see them. I would get, one poppy, there's an orange poppy that's like half open. It almost looks like a shell. But when I brought it home, I peeled off the outside, and I think it was a little bit warmer. And like literally as I was photographing it, I could see it opening.
Yeah.
And then there was a moment of panic because I didn't want it all the way open. And so I was grabbing it just as it was like half emerging.
Right.
And by the time I finished shooting, 10 minutes later, it was completely open. And what I wanted to see was gone.
Yeah.
But it was that kind of alive and excitement. I mean, it was just... there was nothing static. It was dynamic. But for me, it was like so heart it was warming. So I live for that.
I saw a florist with a flannel about a month ago opening flowers in this way. It wouldn't have been poppies, I think, but opening flowers in this way, that she would very tenderly put the hot or the warmed flannel, and these things would go, whoa!
Yeah, but so when you see it, for me, I was also panicking because it's like, I wanted the half open, half closed.
And it was going too fast.
And it was going too fast, but I couldn't do anything about it. So I think I know, I mean, I've had a couple health crises where it could have gone either way, and I might not be here. So I think, again, it hooks into my own, like, just live well, embrace it, feel life. So these projects just take hold of me. I don't really have one at the moment, which is fine. I want to focus on the documentary and some other initiatives that I'm doing as a curator, so I'm not suffering it. And I think we live now in a time when everybody seems to be in a binary frame of mind where it's all destination oriented. And my feeling on that is a lot of that comes out of the technology that everybody's now tethered to, phones, computers. It's all linear thinking, whereas creativity, and certainly being a photographer in the real world as opposed to, say, into a controlled studio, you have to be adaptive, you have to be instinctual, you have to be intuitive, you have to anticipate. You anticipate when you're at a wedding and, maybe there's a little kid who's about to do something ridiculous or adorable, but you anticipate it and you know exactly when to react. Or with me, I knew, like my little Poppy, I had to react quickly. But that's your instinct, that's your knowledge. So I think
reading the game is what I call it.
Reading the game, but you're reading everything that's around you. And I think,
but that comes from experience.
It's also nature, people's nature. A lot of people want to control everything in their life. They want to control the outcome. They want to control the journey. They want to know, okay, if I'm here, I'm going to get exactly here. And I think, in a way, that is sort of at cross purposes with the creative, the dreamy. I think they can work together. But you also have to allow for chance. Even if you're not a photographer, if you're in any of the artistic disciplines, sometimes things just come to you from the side.
Be open to it.
Be open, completely open.
And sometimes, actually, I'm not answering the question. I know I'm asking you, but I'm going to throw something in here that I think sometimes if you change the medium, you take a real left turn at the traffic lights, which is one of my real favourite phrases. So, for example, you're thinking, well, I've lost a little bit of my mojo in the photographic sense. What if you were to write something down? How would that feel? Go and write something instead, or go and record something in audio, or just change that creative input,
or just
surprise yourself,
or just cook, or dig in a garden. I'm
not digging. I'm a creative, darling, not a labourer.
Ouch.
You've just been stung for your pleasure.
A black
don't they know they're in the psychic garden? They shouldn't be doing things like this. I do have one more question for you, and you have answered this once before, and I will be intrigued to go back and listen to how you answered it. But I think the answer to this question changes according to the last couple of years and where you've been. And the last couple of years have been very challenging for you at times. So I'll ask it again now. What is your why?
It's not a why, it's a need.
Oh.
I can't not do it. I mean, I started taking pictures with my mother's Kodak Instamatic camera when I was 11.
Tell me you have that camera.
I think I do.
Most people at this point, when they talk about an old camera, don't have it and lament the fact they don't?
No, I think I have actually an older camera that my mother had because it has little bellows on it, but I don't know that I have that little Instamatic.
You have something connected to her.
But I have the first camera my parents bought me when I was, I think, 17, and I took a photo class in high school. It's like a indestructible Canon FTB1 or 4 or something with a 50 millimeter lens. Yeah. The why is also, I think I'm a peace activist at heart.
Oh.
And I think the Women in War Project is my anti-war statement. Growing up with war history in my family that changed the course of my family's life, my parents' life, and in turn our life. Growing up with the Vietnam War very present as the backdrop through the news feeds, through the photojournalism, which I was influenced by very, very young because I was already aware of it through newspapers and magazines, Nat Geo. It was the last uncensored American war, so all the imagery was coming in. And I think it was also through the music. I was very aware of rock and roll and a lot of the early music with the message, Crosby, Stills and Nash, the message of peace, love, understanding. I had friends who had older siblings who were already kind of, had cars and could drive. And I took those messages to heart. I really, really did. And I think, again, it was through the music. I mean, I was aware of the anti-war movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement. So I think at heart I was always a humanist. But the why for me, especially the Women in War Project, is this is my anti-war statement.
And my thanks to Marissa Roth. How wonderful it was to spend time in person with Marissa on the show. As I said at the start, we've met on a good few occasions now, and actually once I think with Giles. I think one of Giles's afternoon teas, which sounds very English, very British, was a chat with Marissa, I'm sure. Talking of Giles, on the 30th of this month, my good friend Giles Penfound, we are recording, not just with Giles, but with other friends of the show as well, our 500th show. We are going to be walking at Greenham Common, so I know this doesn't work for everybody around the world, but if you'd like to come and walk with us, it's a real community walk. It's a free event. Then go to the website, photowalk.show, and look for the number 500, and you can find out more about it. And that's it for today. So if you can't wait until next Friday and would like to walk a little bit further together, then that's what the Extra Mile edition is all about. We are up to number 148, so we are. You go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you each week and record an additional show. Come on, pups, there's a runner. He stands in the middle of the path when there are runners, and I'm trying to get him out the habit. He doesn't chase runners, he just stands there. What have you got in your mouth? No. I don't know what that is, but you don't need it. Hey, come here. Come and stand here. Good boy, 2 runners. Sit down and wait. Morning. Cool, that looks hard work today. Good luck. See you for a bacon butty. I'll get one in. They're bonkers on a day like this, pups. It's getting too hot for that sort of behaviour. I tell you what, you can have one of these. There's a treat for waiting patiently. We had everything going on there, didn't we? Barge going past, runners going past, everybody nice and friendly and waving though. That's what a photo walk's all about, isn't it, pups? Meeting people, saying hello. Well, I'll come to that in a moment. So that's it for today. I know this sounds a little bit cryptic, but I do have an announcement to make over on the Extra Mile today, which involves Marissa and a trip we are both taking, from which I will be making a podcast. So you will hear it eventually. But on the Extra Mile today, it is revealed with a few thoughts. Say no more for the moment. Now, usually at this point I play a couple of words from that show, but for obvious reasons I can't, although the title of the Reflections piece, which is part of the Extra Mile, involves luggage and, a voyage. Say no more, Neil. Zip. Nada. Stop it. You're doing too much already. And as for saying hello, I reveal a guest that's coming up on the Extra Mile today. Just a remarkable man. And it all started by walking along this path, where I am now, and just saying the word hello. And that's how many a street portrait or path portrait starts. Anyway, I thought I'd do something today, share something with you if you're not an Extra Miler that is on our channel, on the Extra Mile, because I'm not playing you what's coming up on the Extra Mile. So I thought I'd play you something that we've been doing, so you feel a part of it. Now, from the start of the month, I've been writing a daily short 5 to 10 minute feature about life as a creative. And the plans are that the whole thing will just continue because I've been having a lot of creative fun. It's hard work, I tell you, but a lot of creative fun doing it. It's a sort of behind the scenes, sort of slight philosophy of the creative life. Good morning. A lot of joggers today. It's getting too hot for that, as I say. And it's something I've been meaning to do for a good few years now. Train going by in the background as well. I told you, so much happening. They air Monday to Thursday as bite-sized pieces, sort of creative thoughts for the day ahead, with another part on Friday's Extra Mile. And I thought I'd play you one in full now, so you get an idea of what Reflections on the Extra Mile is all about. And I shall watch the train go by.
This is Reflections, the quieter stories from behind the camera and the mic. Memory. Wouldn't it be something, and maybe with science, who knows, if humans could upgrade their memory cards as easily as our cameras allow? Slot in a card so vast, so spacious that you'd never run out of room. Nothing forgotten, nothing lost to time or confusion. Just moment after moment after moment. All there, safely stored. The laughter, the names, the stories. Perhaps give us the ability to back it up to the cloud as well. Of course, the mind doesn't work that way. There's no high-capacity option when it comes to memory, and that's both the wonder of it and sometimes the heartbreak. Friday morning's constant in my life, and Barney's, come to that, is a treat called Bacon Butty Day. That's how it's now referred to in our house, formally and officially. In fact, Friday just gone, because I was recording an interview early doors in the studio, the family got ready for another day at the coalface, sans me and the barking machine's company. So left me a note in the kitchen, requesting I hang the duvet on the line properly folded, and signed off Happy Bacon Butty Day. Barnes seemed to know it was a Friday, aka Bacon Butty Day, and there was no way he was taking his beady eyes off me, thereby cementing his breed's reputation as being known as the Velcro type. If I even so much shifted in my seat in the studio, his head and neck assumed alert posture, ready for the walk, with the promise of some of my bacon butty at the end. I recently asked the vet if I should let Barney partake in this, and I received a slightly furrowed look, accompanied by the words, "All right, not too much," followed by, "My dog loves the sausage meat and a McDonald's breakfast muffin." A quick guide to what a bacon butty is, just in case in your neck of the woods it's called something entirely different. A bacon butty, or bacon bap, bacon sarnie, depending on where you hail from, in the UK at any rate, is the culinary equivalent of a warm hug, particularly on a cold morning. It's very simple. A few rashers of sizzling, streaky or back bacon, usually slapped between two slices of white bread or a soft flour-dusted roll. Brown sauce or ketchup causes national debate. Households have fallen out over less. Brexit is one thing. This debate is quite another. No rocket leaves, no artisan sourdough or crushed avocado in sight. This is breakfast with its sleeves rolled up, smelling faintly of builder's tea and Friday morning hope. Fast forward, interview and morning walk complete, I collected my bacon butty from the Nature Discovery Centre cafe and took that with a coffee to sit under the slight shade of a beech tree's branches near the shore side of the lake. Barney waited for the grand dissection of the sandwich, and we sat there post-photo walk, taking in the sound of chattering ducks and honking geese, with a slight breeze as wondrous comfort. After 5 minutes, a couple made their way across the grass to where we were sitting. "Is that a cockapoo?" asked the chap. Only our daughter's got one of those. It looks exactly like yours. Barnes didn't seem to be concerned that his appearance was being described as a tenpenny dog, or whatever that phrase is, and just kept his eyes fixed upon the prize. Dogs create instant trust, I've found. They've opened up plenty of chats for me, which has led to the opportunity to make portraits as well. "Hello, my name is Neil," I said, "and this is Barney, or Sir Barkalot," which was met with a smile from my new momentary friends. I'll call them Mary and David, if you don't mind, for the moment. Mary lives with the early stages of dementia. She said it gently, not as a headline, but more like a quiet footnote, as though she didn't want it to define her entirely. Actually, she started the conversation by saying, "My memory doesn't work like it used to," easing us into the more revelatory chat to come. She had just attended something called the Nature Memories Cafe, a place for people like her and for carers like David to find a bit of sanctuary, connection and routine. It's not a formal cafe in the usual sense. It's a program where nature and creativity is the backdrop for moments of presence. Talks, gentle walks, making things with your hands, watching the seasons change, that kind of thing. They often discuss how memory works at the cafe, as you would imagine, and we talked a little about something I'd learned from Sam, my wife. It seemed remarkable just how much they wanted to share, actually, with a complete stranger. There's a theory often used in dementia care called the bookshelf model. Imagine your memories stacked on a tall, slightly wobbly bookshelf. Each shelf holds a different stage of your life. The top shelf contains your most recent memories, what you had for lunch yesterday, the conversation maybe you had this morning, where you put your keys and so on. As you go lower, you find the older volumes, your working years, your early adulthood, the school days, childhood. Dementia, I understand, though I am of course no expert, is like someone gently shaking that bookshelf. The books on the top shelves, those lighter, newer memories, are the first to fall. They're the ones most easily lost. But the lower shelves, well, they're a bit sturdier. The books are heavier, better bound perhaps, and often reread. They stay put for longer. Photography, I understand, is being used as a tool for memory issues at events like the one being described to me. Taking pictures is therapy, with a capitalized T. And so we find ourselves at this curious point where memory, photography and creativity meet. Because when we press the shutter, we are in a sense creating a bookmark. We're marking a page, a moment in the chapter of life we're currently in. I suppose that's a good reason why your photos don't have to be great. They just need to be real. There's a higher purpose than simply creating an award winner. We often talk about the photographs we make as memories, captured, framed, frozen, but they can also be prompts. For people like Mary, a photograph might not unlock the entire scene, but it can be a thread that starts to unravel some of the more confusing recall moments. There's even research to back this up. Studies in neurological care have shown that looking at photographs, especially personal ones, can help people with dementia retrieve fragments of memory, or at least connect with the emotion of a moment, even if the details are hazy. It's called reminiscence therapy, and it turns out that our cameras are playing a much bigger role in well-being than we might realize. Creativity doesn't have to be grand. You don't need to write a novel or exhibit at a gallery. Sometimes taking a picture of the light falling across your teacup or writing 3 lines in a notebook is enough to keep the creative mind lit. I think that might be one of the reasons I've chosen to really push my writing in the last couple of months. I feel an entirely different sense of purpose within my writing to that of my picture making. Both are creative oxygen, yes, and both feel like I'm training sets of muscles, but they're slightly different. Subtle differences may be, but differences nevertheless. And creativity, it turns out, may be a lifeline. According to recent findings from organisations such as the Alzheimer's Society and Age UK, engaging in regular creative activities, photography, writing, music, craft, can help maintain cognitive function for longer. It doesn't prevent memory loss entirely, but it can slow its pace and, more crucially, bring joy and meaning into the everyday. It provides agency, a way to express, a way to document, a way to feel seen. We didn't just speak of memory, we talked to the holiday they'd both just been on and the plans they had for their next. I didn't make a portrait this time, it didn't seem appropriate, a chat seemed just fine. I sense though we'll meet again, perhaps at the Memories Cafe, as they're apparently always looking for volunteers to just talk. As Mary and David departed, I stayed back with Barney, who was eyeing the last corner of my bacon sandwich like it might hold the secrets of the universe, as far as a dog might be interested in that kind of stuff. Happy Bacon Butty Day felt oddly fitting. A small, ordinary joy shared on a bench while reflecting on memory, time, and the kindness of strangers.
That's an example of our reflection pieces, and they really do follow a real eclectic mixture of topics and subjects. Sometimes it's behind the scenes, sometimes it's thoughts about a creative life, sometimes it's more about mental health. And as with the other day, the title was La Cucaracha, and I'll let you look that one up for yourself. But that's our reflections piece, an example of the PS to the show is to come. But first, we need a play-out song, don't we? As we do every week. A record to make a few final frames to, or think about what's been said today. I wanted something that was a bit folky, with a touch of summer country, whimsy, road travel-y, if there's such an expression, or genre. I know it's not sunny everywhere, it's always winter somewhere as it is summer somewhere, but I wanted something reflective, and I think I found my song from a voice we haven't featured before, actually. A band called Blooming Cellar, love it. And the song is called Look Good in the Sunshine.
Hope you have a light on your wall, 'cause I gotta ramble, you know the score. Hope you don't think too much about the drunken nights. It's just a taste of a songwriter's life, filled with emotion and love is ice. And I just wanna be truthful tonight. Saved me in my loneliest time, made me look good in the sunshine. Remember your smile on Sunday night. We used to cuddle and hold each other tight, filled with emotion and lover's eyes. And I just wanna be truthful tonight, 'cause I will go on this lonely life. I will go on this lonely life. Understanding me and understanding you, guess it's what we couldn't do. Becoming one was the best thing for us. To be in love this street, filled with emotion, love is eyes. And I just wanna be truthful tonight, 'cause I will go on this lonely life. And I will go on this lonely life. My mind's in turmoil and I know why. Who wants to love twice?
You gotta love a band called Blooming Cellar. What, pups, do you like it as well, do you? Right on cue. I know sometimes people think that I edit you in. I really do not. I promise you that. Sometimes I edit him out. I'll be honest with you about that. Sometimes I have to join the links together because he just won't stop being so Barkalot. But bit of ASMR. There we go, loving these. One more. Bad news, by the way, the cafe that we usually go to get our bacon butty on recording day. Bad news, pups. A lot of the staff have left for various reasons, very political reasons, which we don't really need to go into on this show, but it means that there's no bacon butties at the moment. I'll try and break that one to him gently in a short while. Anyway, just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do, photographing and writing. I will pop up some of the pictures that I've made. I've not made too many today on the walk, so you can see them. And of course, there'll be a lot up there from Marissa Roth to show her work, her extraordinary photojournalist work, and maybe some of her personal projects as well. There'll certainly be links to that sort of thing. And then a few thanks. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT. And he's blooming good, if I can use blooming again. He's a blooming good designer. It's a world he was in before. And he is helping design the new Encounters zine from London. Plus. We're working on a new quarterly zine for the Photo Walk, which hopefully, although we're still checking logistics, or some logistics, should be available worldwide. It'll feature, interviews that we've done, pictures from my walks, your walks, meaningful letters that you've sent into the show. We've got some cracking stuff there, and the perfect recipe for a bacon sarnie. Something like that. I'm very, very excited. And even though I promised Sir Neil of ITsville I would probably stay quiet until it's all organised, I've just blurted some stuff out, haven't I? Anyway, my thanks also to Andrea Gilpin, who keeps a watchful eye over Instagram, Kelly Mitchell for Facebook, and Michael Mixon with the research. Write a postscript for the show. Today, it is from Jocelyn Bain-Hogg, a British documentary photographer known for his long-form projects on identity, masculinity, and the hidden corners of society. His work is direct, often raw, rooted though in care. You're going to hear a quote here that talks of nervousness and vulnerability. He said, and I think you can apply this to other genres too, if you're not nervous before you photograph someone, you're probably not doing it right.
What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides thoughts can be cruel. They're not mine to hold. The space unravels when you let go.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.